Hey everyone, welcome back. As promised, I am here with two doctors, Dr. Rafael Bocamazzo, which is a little bit
That
hard
was
to say.
close.
Was it close? All right,
That was real close.
I'm going to call it, how do you say it properly?
Bocamazzo.
Bocamazzo. Okay, yes, it needs a little bit more, right? So Bocamazzo. I'm going to go with Dr. B.
Everybody does for long Italian name reasons.
Okay.
It's much easier.
Yes. So we'll go with Dr. B because I know people mess up Gygax all the time, so I get it. So I appreciate that. And then, of course, Dr. Megan Connell is joining us as well. So just a quick, thank you both so much for being here. It's an exciting topic for me. I'm really wondering, I've seen throughout many years that I've played, and I always kind of take it for granted that role-playing games, and specifically Dungeons and Dragons, in my experience, has helped people overcome various obstacles. And a lot of times, I don't want, I'm not able to diagnose anyone. I'm not trained or whatever, but I would suspect some people had some learning disabilities, personality types that didn't, it was hard for them to get social cues and they were awkward. But through Dungeons and Dragons, they were able to form friends and I think improve their social skills and fit in better. People were able to realize, I've heard anecdotally, that some people were able to really explore other facets of who they are and maybe realize something about themselves that they weren't as comfortable with through this experience. So, I've seen that anecdotally. I've had people tell me. I'm curious kind of about the mechanics behind it, which is why I thought it'd be really great to have you guys on and talk to you. And I know Dr. B is a mental health advocate who's the kind of the started or the lead of clinical director is a proper term of Take This.
I was like, no, I'm not in charge of the organization. I don't want to be in charge of the organization. Don't put that on me.
All right. He's the clinical director though of Take This, which is a mental health advocacy with a mission, if I can roughly just kind of paraphrase it, of making mental health more destigmatizing it, accepting that mental health issues happen in the gaming community, and that people who make games are human beings too, and sometimes have these problems just like the people who play them, right? And it's okay. And so we can talk about it and advance it and help people out when they hit rough patches. And then Dr. Connell is more into the actual clinical practice of teaching and conducting clinical practice using role-playing games. And I think you work with inclusivity and women in gaming and things like that. So you can expand upon that. And your website is Geek Therapeutics. And you can expand upon that as we go. I just wanted to give a quick overview. So why does RPGs, why do they help us? What do they do? Why do they help us?
God, big question. I was like, the sort of horrible answer right now is like, we're still figuring that out. We have theories, but research is lacking. I'm expecting probably this year and next year, we're going to start seeing more and more studies coming out. Because I think both Dr. B and I have consulted with a number of folks doing research. I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, there were a lot of people starting studies. And so we're right about the time when those studies should be getting published. So hopefully, but okay. I think you actually kind of hit the nail on the head with a lot of it is it's practice. If you have a hard time starting conversations, you get to be in this group with friends and you're practicing conversations with your friends, but then also as your character is out exploring the world, your character is having to practice these skills. And the more you practice the stuff, the easier it seems to get. From a psychological standpoint, we know that behavioral rehearsal and role-playing and just practicing is humongous in getting people to utilize those skills outside of the therapy setting.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to preface everything with is and this is something that Dr. Connell and I say all the time, there is a big difference between therapeutic and therapy. So if you are a DM, don't therapize your players, okay? Just please don't do it. Do not therapize your friends ever, ever, ever. Even if you're a therapist, you're not supposed to do that to your friends. But what you can do to provide this therapeutic environment that just may be incidentally helpful because somebody decides, hey, this is safe enough to explore, I did this as a kid. I was undiagnosed with autism until I was 35. And the fact that I had a welcoming, safe, accepting environment to do exactly what Luke and Dr. Connell said, of being able to explore different aspects of personality, of behavior, of social skills, you know, I remain awkward, but I jokingly like to thank Wes Anderson for making awkward cute in his movies. So it really helped my social life. But these characters I played, especially as a teen, they were charming, they were suave, they were socially savvy, all the things I didn't think I was. And, you know, about 10 years later, I realized, oh God, that was coming from somewhere. That was coming from me. And it was this safe, accepting space that my friends and I had that allowed me to explore it with relatively few consequences. And that's just a beautiful thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, I've really never not known role playing. So as long as I can remember, I've been role playing. And one thing I notice is that I'm not, well, I can be shy and awkward, but I'm able to tap into the ability to be persuasive, take charge, lead people. I'm a soldier by trade, and I've been in the Army for like 32 years now. But every time, whether I was enlisted or officer, you know, I generally end up in a leadership position in training or whatever. It just was one of those things. I think that's not some sort of, because I'm this, you know, I rolled a high charisma score or whatever it is, you know, in the world. I think it was the practice, right? It was the practice of being the party leader, calling what direction we're going to go. Hey, okay, here's how we're going to take on this puzzle or this difficulty. And so I had more reps, you know, going into it as a 18-year-old than maybe some of the other folks did.
Mm-hmm.
I'd had public speaking, you know, persuasive, small group dynamics, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think there's a lot of advantages that role playing gives everybody, and particularly if you were the, you know, quote unquote awkward person, you really benefit from that. And I hope, you know, I read the internet, and of course, you know, read, depending on where you're at.
Elvis
sometimes
is alive.
you hear, yeah, well, you hear, you know, what I was really thinking is when I was coming up, we were all nerds, right? So I think for the most part, we were pretty accepting of someone, you know, looked a little different or had some sort of, you know, disability or whatever the case was, because we were all, you know, we're, you know, we weren't the cool kids necessarily, right? There were some cool kids who gamed, but not a lot. So we're a pretty accepting group of people, and this whole idea of, you know, allowing people to be themselves was more accepted, right? So I hope that's still the case, so that you have this safer environment to experiment with different aspects in practice, and make friends too, right? Make life fun.
Yeah. Well, and that idea of like safety and having a good safe space is a really important aspect of the therapy groups and creating that safety. And so in the therapist term for this is informed consent, where we talk about like how things are going to be applied, how we're going to talk about things, what things we're going to talk about, what are our on and off limit topics and everything. And it's that idea of creating that safe, inclusive space is actually why I made groups that are for women and girls and those who identify as female, because we just know like there's a lot of harassment that can happen at tables. A lot of women face a lot more gatekeeping, and D&D is such a fabulous game for women as well, and trying to give that safe space for folks to learn and make mistakes in a place where it's comforting, so that when they go into game stores or conventions and things, they're feeling more comfortable and competent in how they play, and then also have that secure place to explore the deeper therapeutic ties that we're going to be bringing into that game.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and it's something that I'm sort of not, you know, it seems foreign to me, is the idea of not feeling comfortable going into a group and role playing. Like, but I've heard many people say it like, oh, it's too daunting, I couldn't do it. Yes, you can. It's very easy, and I think a wonderful resource that we have is the, you know, YouTube or whatever it is that you're going to watch, Twitch, YouTube, that you're going to watch other people play, and it demystifies it and take some of that away. Just like, I guess, exploring and hearing other people's stories who have behavioral health, mental health issues helps people who are maybe, it's a low percentage of the entire population, but you can find there's other people like you and you're not alone. That's also a useful tool. But yeah, you're right. I've heard lots of people say that they may not feel comfortable. They want to feel fully prepared going there. So having that safe environment to be able to do that is good. And unfortunately, yes, I think especially in the earlier days, there was a higher population of men. And so if you were a female, you could get razzed, or it could be used in a negative way that would dissuade you from playing this game and being able to be part of the community, which is unfortunate. But I think that's certainly waning, or hopefully gone for the most part. And I think people are actively working against or towards that goal of inclusivity, which I think was one of the areas you talked about in your training, was inclusivity, ethics, diversity, and inclusivity in your therapy. So how do you apply that, or how do you train that, or how is that a component?
Well, it's looking at, just in short, like thinking through what is the goal of the group, and how do we achieve that goal, and how do we ensure that therapy, and especially like group therapy and stuff, is in many ways about being vulnerable and making that space where you feel comfortable looking at the parts of you maybe don't like very much. And so that those parts can grow and develop and change. And so we want to create a space that's like where people feel comfortable. And so what are the rules around that are going to help people feel comfortable opening up to one another? I really love Monty Cook's came up with consent in gaming, and they have this wonderful sheet that we've adapted I've adapted for my games. It gives you like go, no go topics. You use a light system, and we can have conversations about like what's going to make the game not fun. What's going to make things not fun for us in here? It invariably, some sort of insect usually ends up on my not fun list for the groups I run. And it's just, but it's interesting because it's like, and then the players ultimately will do like what little kids do, which is test those limits, right? It's like, we're going to put a toe out of line and see, are you going to actually enforce this so that we can be safe? Right? If you're telling me not to touch the hot stove, don't get near the stove, are you going to correct me when I get too close to the stove? And so I think that that's one of the big parts of it. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to it, but Dr. B.
Yeah, actually, I mean, if anything, I mean, maybe this is autism brain or whatever, but I love well-defined frameworks. I really do. And that's something that is done. So while I don't actively, I'm not an active practitioner at this point. I was clinically trained. I did used to work with people. I probably will again at some point in the future. But one of the things I love about going into therapy is exactly what Dr. Connell mentioned, and that's informed consent. You sit down with your therapist, you agree to the parameters of therapy, you know what you're going to be doing, you know what you're not going to be doing, you know how to rectify things if things go outside that framework, and that gives you a well-defined sandbox in which to play, essentially. And a good session zero does exactly the same thing. Whenever I see, and again, Dr. Connell and I talk about this from time to time when we're looking at people on various internet groups who are just like, hey, I'm having a conflict with my player. What do I do? And like 90% of the time, I believe is something you say frequently, is 90% of the time it's talk to your player. Did you do a session zero?
Yeah.
And the concept of the session zero, I think, is just so consumer friendly. It's like, hey, this is the kind of game I'm trying to run. Are you down with that? No? Cool. Let's find you a different kind of game. What's going to make this fun for you so I can serve your needs as a DM, as a GM, whatever proprietary name the system uses? Cool. Great. Let's come to an agreement. Now let's play. I love that so much. It gets everybody on the same page right away. It saves so much hassle. No more, so much less ambiguity down the line of, ooh, do I say something because that really, that made me feel icky. It's such a great lesson that I think everybody should be doing. And thankfully, we're seeing more and more doing exactly that. Dr. Connell mentioned the Monty Cook consent form, which incidentally, at the same time that came out, she and I were working on a consent
right.
form for ourselves as well. And it was like 4 pages long. And then we saw the one that Monty Cook Games produced and we were like, can't do better. We're out.
Yeah, we were so far. Luckily we hadn't sunk too many hours into writing it, but like we were pretty far into, and then like they came out with theirs. We're like, this is so much better than what we were doing.
Way better than anything we were coming up with.
Yeah, and I think that's important to, you know, especially I'm thinking where I imagine would be more, where you run into more challenges is in a organized play or convention style play, where you don't know really who's going to sign up for your game and what could really make them uncomfortable, right? I mean, people have all sorts of various backgrounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And something that's very innocuous to me could be troubling to someone and really, you know, not only spoil their fun, but really give them a bad day, really, you know, affect them. So I think that's important. And if you're going to, you know, just encourage people, if you're running a convention game, really be careful or include what's in your description. It has these elements in it. If there's something that's not like PG or whatever, right? I think most games have violence involved, right? So, but if it's some sort of extreme violence or, you know, certainly sexual themes, we want to definitely, you know, note those very stringently and have your age requirements. But even, you know, drug use, drinking, you know, underworld activity, right? You know, criminal activity, stuff like that could impact people. So communication is very important. And I mean, you guys may be able to tell me this if you hear, even in home games where people have known each other for a number of years, do these issues still arise?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God, yes.
Okay.
Oh my God, yes.
Because I would think
personal experience. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Here you think, oh, well, I've known these people since we were in high school. No problem. I know I can do this and no one's going to care about it. But in reality.
Well, let's contextualize that for a sec, okay?
Sure.
Like, okay, so depending on what research you look at, roughly 25 to 50% of the American population will be diagnosed with a mental health condition in their lifetime, an average of 1 in 5 in a given year. Okay, most people aren't talking about their mental health challenges. And even people who do have or are fairly open about their mental health challenges might have stuff they're not necessarily fairly open about. I have publicly said in vague details, I have a not insignificant trauma history in my background. I don't share details about that publicly. And I don't get into details about that with my friends even, for the most part, because it's horrible. I don't want to get into that stuff with them. I want to have a good time with my friends. It's, you know, and so how are my friends, even the ones who have known me for decades, supposed to know what my literal trauma triggers are? Unless we kind of talk about that ahead of the time, where they innocuously, just innocently are trying to play a game and they throw something into a game that is a literal trauma trigger for me. And suddenly there I am experiencing it again. They don't know that. Talking about this stuff ahead of time is the only just reasonable way to avoid these situations.
Well, and also I think using a safety tool as well, you know, like definitely talking beforehand, but sometimes like if you've got like, I was in the military too, did 7 years active duty, deployed to Iraq, got the patch. That was fun. Not really, but there's something to treating PTSD for somebody who's newly developing PTSD because of a mortar attack that burned down their 2 weeks ago, and what those scars I carry forward with. And like a lot of that stuff, I'm like, I'm not going to talk about that in session 0 because I just didn't see that ever coming up in a game, but then it does. And it's just like, oh, this is not fun. Now I'm playing back to the sounds of sirens and laying on the floor and feeling everything shaking around me. Like this is not fun right now. And so having, utilizing something like the X card is a great tool. I love playing face-to-face games more than online games, but one of the things I love about online play is the ability to subtly tell the DM something without everybody else at the table knowing.
Yeah, the direct message feature is a beautiful, beautiful concept.
Like, and that idea of sending an N for we are nearing a boundary of mine, or X, we have crossed a boundary. And I love that. And like, that's such a great way for the DM to make sure that their game's staying fun. They're still processing through things in a way that makes sense.
One one of the metaphors I like to use when it comes to the table is like a functional movie set. Okay, and the GM is the director, the producer, the executives, the lawyer, all of these things, and your players are your leads. And in order to have that sort of collaborative, that collaborative exploration, there needs to be trust. And without safety tools in place, without talking about things ahead of time, it's really hard to have trust. And it just, I mean, it really does make a better game.
I would think that just like when we agree to get together and suspend reality and play this, fantastic game, right? The rules need to be consistent, right? Otherwise, like, well, if I do this and this is how it's adjudicated, or this is reasonable or not. And that builds that trust, right? So you're trusting the DM isn't just faking his die rolls or making it up, whatever. You feel like you have power, right? Like you're part of this activity. So I think it's kind of a logical growth, or in that same wheelhouse, to build that trust, and what interests your players. Just like, oh, they want to go in hack and slash, or they want to do a lot of intrigue, or they want to do a lot of RP and solve puzzles more so. Well, great, that, and then you need to know where some of the areas that make them uncomfortable are as well. So it's what they want and what they don't want, or really would be harmful. And so it's, again, really dialogue is important, right? I think that's what it's going to break down to. So I think that's really neat. And I did see that consent form from Monty Cook Games, but I thought that was kind of cool. And the X card idea, especially, for me, I would think especially in convention play and things like that.
Yeah.
But that's why I asked that question. How about your home game? It could be there too. So maybe that's part of that communication, where when maybe it's an off night, or you're done with your campaign, you're going to start another one, or if you're bringing people in again after many years, right? Which as an older guy, that happens, right? I was with my buddies when we were like teenagers and 20s, early 20s, and then there's a long break, and then we're trying to get back together again to play some games. I don't know what's going on in that space of time, right? There could be some significant things as mentioned. So just kind of giving the courtesy and letting people know, maybe there's nothing for your group, or maybe there's 3, 4, or 5 significant things you need to be aware of. So I think that's important. One of the other reasons why I really wanted to kind of delve into this area of behavioral health, mental health, and benefits of RPGs is through my work with Gary Kahn and Extra Life with Children's Hospital, Wisconsin Children's Hospital in Milwaukee. They reached out to me a couple of years ago now, and they had wanted to start a program where they taught their social workers who work with disadvantaged youth how to be dungeon masters. And the thought was, if they can, if they bring these 13-year-olds or so, 12, 13-year-olds into play D&D with their social worker, that'll form this strong bond that will keep them coming back for services, even when they're older, right? In the late teens, and maybe hit the age of majority, and they don't have to, or maybe resources become less available to them without some work, when they get over 18. And they thought this would work. I thought it was really cool. I was willing to sponsor it, but I think COVID kind of got in the way of that. My thought, just as a layman, was it's not going to be the social worker that they're going to be close to. My thought was they're going to be way closer to their adventuring party. I thought that their friends, these people who they're gaming with, are going to become their friends. They're going to become that resource that they can lean on in tough times, just as they have in the adventure. So I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on that, or if
well, I think you're very much right in that. So one of the beautiful things in the groups that I run, so it's all for girls and those who identify female, there was like an 8-month time period where most of them had birthdays, and it became the tradition that whose birthday it was hosting a sleepover for everybody else in the group, and the birthday person was running a game for everybody else.
Oh, that's adorable.
And it was so, because like these were girls who, many of them had been bullied to the point that they had no friends and like felt socially isolated, and like they just had each other. And that's really what we want is those positive peer social interactions. And so no, that's exactly right, that they would build, as long as they're gaming with the same people week after week, yeah, they're probably going to build those really strong bonds. But as you're saying that too, with like the social workers, the idea that they'll actually come in, like Adam and Adam from Game to Grow were talking about how one of the big feedbacks they get is like, this is the only therapy I can get my kid to go to. And that's part of why it's so successful, is because like it doesn't even feel like therapy you're playing. I mean, it's a game first where you sprinkle therapy in.
Yeah, and I know with the group that I used to work with in the Seattle area, that I was I ran their D&D program back in the days when I worked with people directly. That was the thing we heard time after time after time, is the people in those groups, the kids who came to those groups, that subsect of the program had the highest retention rate out of all of the social skills, groups that they had. And that's because it's fun, it's collaborative. It just, if you think about any group activity that's collaborative, it intrinsically builds trust in each other, at least if you're successful at it. And we know from research study after research study that feeling a sense of acceptance and community is one of the most protective factors in pretty much every mental health challenge across the board. If you've got your adventuring party in real life, you tend to do better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's the big secret for Dungeons and Dragons, is it's beneficial, but it's really just hidden in fun. It's a fun game that has all these kind of, oh, by the way, it also helps you cope with stuff and you learn skills, and yeah.
But like there's really something to this, because we know from research that for our comparison, group therapy is way better than individual therapy. For I think it's pretty much every diagnosis across the board, with a couple of exceptions in the eating disorder category. But the problem is you can't get people to come to group therapy. And what I did a 10-week training a little while ago, and I'm doing another one in the fall, but two of the participants were running groups at a college. And as soon as the groups opened up, the four sections of D&D groups all filled within like 48 hours. And none of the other groups, like the processing groups, the depression groups, the social skills groups, the anxiety groups, those had like one or two people signed up, but all the D&D groups were at capacity pretty much immediately. And so it's like, we know group therapy works, but how do we get people to come into group therapy? It's like, well, we make it fun. We make it enjoyable, and making it a game is one of the ways that we can do that.
And I don't think our industry, the mental health profession, has done itself any favors in the last 150 years, especially in the early days, where there's a lot of what was done way back when is rooted in some pretty gnarly, horrible concepts like eugenics. And so there's unfortunately some stereotypes that are largely untrue these days about, malevolent practitioners who are just going to make you feel uncomfortable and probe you for their sadistic benefit. And I don't know about you, Dr. Connell, but I've certainly met some ineffective practitioners, but I don't think I've ever met any sadistic ones.
No. I think some of my clients might have, who I work with in trauma, where they might say I push people, but my job is better. So.
But hiding this trusting environment within an alternative framework, using a game as a delivery vehicle for these established interventions or these established social skills building activities, it's just great because you don't have the same stigma attached to it. And I think it's inherently a little bit more egalitarian than going into somebody's office who as my beard gets grayer, I hesitant to say some old white gray-haired white dude who's, tell me about your mother. And it I have like another year and I can't do that anymore. But
you can't, it'll just be scarier.
It'll just, it'll be terrifying. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to put that on my form. I don't but no, you're right. It's destigmatized, and that's why it's accessible. And anecdotally, I've had a couple people I know who had horrible stuff going on at the house, alcoholic parents who beat them, sexual abuse from family members, death, horrible diseases that were terminal, and their parents were, they're going to lose a parent, and D&D helped them escape for a little while and probably learn some skills to, not only just as escapism, but probably learn how to be strong and be a hero, right?
Use that word. What is wrong with that word gets so maligned so often. What's wrong with a little healthy escapism?
Yeah.
Escapism is very healthy. And like the thing I love about D&D escapism is it's escapism with company.
Yes. You're not stuck in a phone.
A lot of video games and stuff. It's a solo escapism, which is also healthy and good too at times. But like sometimes we isolate ourselves when really what we need is social support.
Yeah. And for me, I've dealt with plenty of hard times. I mean, I'm so old, I was in Desert Storm and there wasn't internet and there wasn't any way to talk to my family, and it sucked. And so I had my buddies out there and we made up games. We're infantrymen, so we weren't able to carry books and stuff with us, but we just made up games. I found a set of 6-siders at like a PX trailer or something, and so I bought those and we just made a game, silly games, from board games to RPGs that we'd play in our free time, and that helped us escape from being in a really crappy environment.
There's a big difference between distraction and avoidance, and there's a different, and I think it's important that we make a distinction there, because escapism as a broad term isn't inherently bad. There are times when the world is going on around you, and you basically got to be like, yo, time out, I got to take a break. I want to not think about this stuff, so when I'm come back to thinking about this stuff, I'm fresh.
Yep. Yeah, that has a lot of value to it. And this, this is a very interesting topic. I feel like I'm just getting warmed up and I finally think I learned to pronounce Dr. Connell's name appropriately as opposed to Connell. Sorry about that, Dr.
No worries.
Dr. B, I'm just going to leave it at Dr. B.
We both deal with this all the time. It's
I try to pronounce people's names correctly. Just I know it can be a pet to people, but I think this is great. Unfortunately, we're getting close to a time when we need to wrap it up. But if we want to learn more about what you guys are doing, where can we go? What books have you written? Where can we dig in more? Where can we connect with you outside of here? Dr. B?
Dr. Connell. No, I'm going. Okay. I'm used to not going first. All right. Well,
that's okay. Let Dr. Connell go first.
Yeah, there we go.
Just as I take a drink. You can find me most nights over at Geeks Like Us. That's the media company and the co-founder of Actually Tomorrow Night. You'll see Dr. B over there too, because we're live streaming a live D&D game, Clinical Role, where all of the players are other therapeutic game masters and psychologists. I'm also doing training through Leyline Geek Therapeutics, and then also on my own as well. And you can follow me on Twitter at MeganSide or meganside.com.
And I thought it was very cute, the Clinical Role. I really liked that. And I meant to mention that and I didn't. So I'm glad you gave that a shout out, because I really liked that. So
I believe Dr. Connell got permission to use that from Matt.
Yeah.
Those guys are great too. I mean, they were so welcoming. They actually let me use their studio for Founders and Legends 1 when I did a shot at the brand new Critical Role studio at that time. And then their staff all volunteered to come in that weekend and work. I paid them, but they volunteered to come in, so I didn't have to find all those people, which would have been very daunting because I had no idea what I was doing. So they made it very easy. They're great. Critical Role guys are good folks. So I really love them. And Dr. B, where can we find you?
I mean, pretty much everything I do is with Take This. You can go, as Take This was, the first mental health nonprofit to serve the game community since 2012, yada, yada, yada. But you can find everything we do there at takethis.org or on all the socials at takethis.org. If you are looking for me specifically and you want to see rants about hats and D&D and cooking and other mental health stuff and autism, then you can find me on all the socials at the Dr. B, just like it says under my name, right down there. TheeDoctor, B as in boy.
All right. And I think that's something we need to hear more about is hats and D&D. So
I am happy to talk about. I have many hats. I have like 15 within reach.
Yeah, I see a whole array of hats behind you.
Oh, that's the small hat wall. There's 20 more in the hallway.
All right. I see. All right. Well, guys, thank you very much, both of you, for joining me. I think this is something that maybe we'll have to bring back in for Gary Con or something, and be able to talk more about this. I think it's a topic that people would love to interact about and ask questions, and probably have some real, seek some advice for their game and that sort of stuff. So really appreciate it. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a short break and come back with the GAX pack. Jason, Charles, Miller, and the entire pack are back for a special adventure. So stay tuned.
Changing kids' health through children's hospitals isn't just about helping those in critical situations. It's also about the research, preventative care, health and safety education, and other support services that help build healthier communities today and tomorrow. You can help change kids' health and change the future for all of us. Register at extra-life.org.
For every child treated at the Neurological Institute, we want the same thing, to help them achieve their greatest neurological potential.
To do this, you need experts in pediatric neurology and neurosurgery, who are leading research that advances the standard of care, who are delivering the best outcomes and providing care centered on the entire family.
You need to treat children with every condition, with every type of care that they need. And this works best when the child, their parents, and the care team can come together, partnering in the same space at the same time.
At Children's Hospital Los Angeles, we have all these things.
We know the need for neurological care for children in our community is great, and we are committed to meeting that need. We have experts in nearly 20 subspecialty areas.
We are training pediatric neurologists and neurosurgeons, making operational decisions to help us meet the needs of more children, and pioneering discoveries that improve care here in Los Angeles and around the world.
Our commitment to research at Children's Hospital Los Angeles makes us unique. It makes us better doctors and helps us and the community as we continue to learn and grow.
With our neurologists and neurosurgeons working side by side, we review complex cases together in real time. This ensures that everyone understands what will happen in the days and weeks after surgery.
The impact for families is huge. We can avoid unnecessary delays in treatment. We can consider all the treatment approaches and present a comprehensive care plan. And most importantly, families have clarity about their care every step along the way.
We designed our clinic space with the help of our patients, parents, and our team members who've helped thousands of children facing neurological diagnoses. We've built this space to bring all of our specialists and disciplines together seamlessly.
This is the largest pediatric clinic of its kind in the Western United States. Neurologists and neurosurgeons will come together with other experts and supportive services, all for our patients.
It's also an enhanced experience for our residents and fellows, helping us produce future doctors dedicated to child health. Most importantly, the convenience for families is vastly improved.
Our Neurological Institute is bringing the most leading-edge care model to patients and their families. And we designed this space to let us grow to meet the needs of our community now and for the future.
In our clinic, we can perform EEG studies on the same day as a child's neurology appointment. Our patients see the most appropriate specialist in their first appointment itself, and they can get all of the care they need without leaving the clinic.
Families often spend months visiting providers to accomplish what we can do here in a single visit. This means fewer delays in care and better outcomes for our kids.
It's an impressive thing to see the best multidisciplinary team come together and provide family-centered care that helps children live their best lives. And we have designed a neurological institute that is doing just that every day at Children's Hospital Los Angeles.
Spurt, the kobold, briefly serving as the guide to the Mighty Nine, led them down a tunnel of the Underdark, and then as the Mighty Nine were chit-chattering, kind of went off ahead on his own and entered a big giant cave that had two fire giants. Now Spurt is a CR 1/8 monster. Fire giants each are like a CR 9 monster. So he threw his bag of bees at one of them, and it did what you would expect a bag of bees to do. It just plopped down in this little bzzz, No effect whatsoever. And then one of the giants just smushed him. Spurt showed up for 15 minutes actually in an episode that was kind of very straight up to that point. So he was like this humorous interlude, I guess, for lack of a better term. So the fact that he was humorous, the fact that he wasn't live there for very long, so you only got to enjoy him for a brief period of time, I think that won a lot of people over. And then Chris Dupuis, one of the people who works on the creative side of Idle Champions, said, hey, this little guy, he's something. We can make something out of this. Do you mind if we take that ball and run with it? And then they made it. And then they had their little gifts that they did showing Spurt being smashed with the big hammer. And it's like, yes. Why do they fall in love with Spurt so much? Because he tries. You know, life has dealt him a cruel hand. He is a kobold who has never seen the light, and life down in the Underdark is a horror show for the most part. Yet, you know, he's managed to live 11 days and done pretty well for himself in that time. And he seems like an upright little guy. I think the fact that he's small, that he's unabashedly harmless, and that he's got all these fun little toys that can surprise and delight makes him an easy sell. There's just something kind of pathetic and likable about kobolds in general. Because they are on the like absolute weakest spectrum of humanoid life. It's like you can't find a humanoid character really who's any weaker than a kobold. Weaker than a kobold would be a terrible insult.